Welcome to episode 35 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to ultra-distance cyclist Grant Lottering. Grant, good morning. How are we doing today? You're in Cape, aren't we?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Same as yesterday. Probably the same I'll feel tomorrow. Strange times.
Very strange times. Where are we finding you, Grant? You're in Western Cape, huh?
Yeah, I'm here in Somerset West. Yes. Okay. Soft drizzle outside at the moment. It's quite nice.
Oh, yeah, we've had a bit of that rain already. Grant, how have you been keeping yourself fit over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I'm a Techno Gym ambassador, so they dropped off a skill bike, one of their indoor trainers, a month or two ago. So I'm quite fortunate. I've been able to train on that thing. I haven't been Zwifting and all that stuff like everybody else, but I've been doing a fair amount of quality work on it. I'm just focusing on doing some quality work. Yeah, so I'm fortunate.
Because you were supposed to be in Italy around this time, were you not?
Yeah, I was going to go over on the 3rd of May to do a recon for my Impossible Tour in Italy later this year. Yeah, so yeah, that was quickly put on the back burner.
So Grant, let's start your story from the beginning. Have you always been a cyclist from school? Where or when did you start picking up cycling?
Yeah, Adam, I was since I was 12. I saw a race in my hometown, Randburg, up in Joburg, when I was like, I was 11 years old. And I saw the pros racing, and I just loved it. And it just never left me. I started riding. I remember I went and bought a yellow T-shirt, black rugby shorts. Yeah. I had soccer shoes at home. I took a little hacksaw and I cut all the studs off. And that was my cycling shoes. And there I went with my yellow T-shirt, That's how I started riding.
And your journey from then, you started riding with the elites?
Yeah, that was, I started as a little juvenile, a schoolboy, they called it back then. Then a juvenile, then I became a junior. And I was around about grade 11, 12. I started racing with the elites in the national tours and that. Got some really good results, got my junior Springbok colors. Finished school. I wanted to go and study to become an architect. But then the army, we still had to do our 2 years national service back then, So they said, come and ride for defense. You'll sleep at home at night and you'll be based in Pretoria and you'll ride for defense, which I thought, let me do that, which I did. So I kept racing right through my 2 years. And then I turned pro with a Panasonic team with Robbie McIntosh and Johnny Kuhn. Those guys, we were in the same team. Raced in Europe, and I came back and I decided to stop and start a proper career.
Okay. And then you were training for World Champs in 2013, and you were at the Charlie goal race.
That's right.
Tell us what happened there, Grant.
Yeah, it's a hell of a race. I'm surprised more South Africans haven't gone over to do it. Everybody goes over to do the Maratona and the Letapta Tour and those famous ones. But this race in Trento, Charlie Goal, it's a remarkable race. Hellishly tough, but incredibly beautiful. My goodness. And the World Champs was going to be on the same race, on the same roads, same finish line, everything. So I went over. I trained a year for this race. I qualified. You have to qualify to ride in the World Champs. I qualified down in Pietersmaritzburg in 2012. And I went over and I did the race. And I based myself there for 3 weeks to train. And it was about 2 months before the actual World Champs would have happened. Okay. And it rained really hard the night before the race. Even that morning, I remember still waking up in the hotel at about 3 in the morning. And I could just hear it raining outside. Yes, it was hectic. And there's a lot of cobblestones on that route. There's a lot of narrow technical descents on that route off the mountains. And it was down the first mountain, came around a corner. I was in a small group and I was not familiar with that road. And the guys were flying down there and I tried to stay with them. And I entered the one corner a little bit too wide, and there was water on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And I went through the water and I lost control, and I just went straight on into this rock embankment.
Sure.
Straight into it. Yeah, over 60 km an hour.
That was, yeah, quite a crash. A lot of the doctors said you were very lucky to be alive after that crash. Tell us about your injuries.
Yeah. I was very lucky, but I think also there was a lot of miracles on that day. Number one, I never even scratched my helmet, so I had no head injury.
Yeah.
But from everything else on the right side of my body, I broke 22 bones. Everything on the right side, including 12 ribs and 12 rib fractures. My femur was right off. My hip bone, my shoulder blade was crushed. My collarbone shattered. I had a floating shoulder, so the whole shoulder was detached basically.
Yeah.
My sternum I had a compound fracture in my sternum. I had compound fractures in my spine, internal bleeding. My lungs collapsed. Veins ruptured. There was a whole lot of stuff. But I was very fortunate because I was quite far in the front of the race. I was near the front of the race at that point. So the race referee car was behind me. And in that car was the head of the ICU unit in the Trento Hospital. And they came across the scene and they stopped. He jumped out. He had all his kit with him and he started to work on me straight away. Saved my life.
So the work that he did actually saved your life. Had you had to wait a bit longer, it might have been a different story.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, because a couple of the riders stopped and they tried to help. My femur, in fact, was broken by a rider who crashed into me because I was lying half in the road. Sure. And so that was quite hectic. And so fortunately, that guy stopped anyone trying to do CPR. Imagine they try to do CPR with the broken ribs and stuff. So, but yeah, they had to shock me twice. He came to see me in hospital afterwards and explained what happened. Yeah. They had to shock me twice. My heart stopped beating twice. And then they brought in a helicopter and they flew me out. They flew me out of the mountains into ICU, where I was in ICU for 9 days and high care for 21 days. Yeah. And then I got flown back with medical assistance to Joburg. Spent 4 months at home recovering.
And Grant, do you remember any of this? I mean, obviously you remember the riding bit, but do you remember from the time that you hit the wall?
I do. I remember it very vividly. Yeah, I can relive it all. I still do quite often because I never lost consciousness. It was such an impact, but I never scratched my helmet. So, and I was conscious that whole time. But it's quite strange when you're that kind of trauma and that shock, your body responds differently, obviously. But so consciously, I think I started losing it, and then subconsciously you sort of like you get almost like a slow motion replay of the events that happened. Yeah. I can remember all the people around me, and I remember up to a point where I couldn't breathe anymore, and I remember in my heart I was talking to God and just saying to him, I'm ready to die, it's okay. And I was convinced I was going to die. I couldn't feel anything anymore. I couldn't hear anything. I could still see everyone, but I couldn't feel or hear anything. And I couldn't breathe. So then I started then my heart stopped. Yeah, passed out.
Oh, that's absolutely incredible. And at any point, did you ever think, I'm never going to ride again, I'm never going to walk again? If I do, my life's going to be different? Or were you just in a state of calm?
Well, I mean, I woke up in ICU later the next day. After about 30 odd hours, I came around in ICU. But I was on a ventilator, so that pipes and tubes and stuff. And I was heavily sedated. I remember waking up in ICU and I thought I was paralyzed because I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. And I could just remember seeing all these lights around me, So that was extremely traumatic. And for a while in ICU, I knew my life was never going to be the same. The doctors were adamant because I just wanted to know one thing. Am I going to be able to walk? Am I going to be able to ride my bike?
Yeah.
And I remember the one doctor came up to me and he said, the guys here call you dead man walking. in hospital.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but they said, you'll walk. Don't worry about that. You'll be fine. But you'll never ride a bike again. It's just not going to be possible. Your shoulder's totally crushed. So, yeah, it was a tough pill for me to swallow, But I was 2 days out of ICU. I was in high care. And then the doctor had saved my life on the road, came to see me. He sat with me for about an hour that night. He just came off shift.
Yeah.
And he said to me, you survived death and you can do something with your life. There's a reason you're alive,
Yeah.
So, but I remember I still asked him, will I ride again? He said to me, probably not. Those was his exact words, probably not. And I remember he left there and I wrote in a little book, I'll be back next year. But I'll prove you wrong. I'm going to come back. I'm going to finish this race. Yeah. And I just started working towards that. That was my one goal. Get back on the bike as quick as I could, even though I couldn't walk. So that's the power of having a dream.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the power of the mind, I believe. And between 2013 and 2018, you had 11 operations, an array of all over the place, or was there a focused area, or what was the big operations you had?
Yeah, it was quite hectic. Look, in the ICU, they had to fix my leg. They had to put a pin in my femur, in my hip. So they did that quite successfully. We didn't have to do any work on that other than my hip mobility, which was wonderful. And they couldn't fix my shoulder in Italy. They just put a K wire in here just to keep my shoulder up. So all my shoulder surgery I had to do back home. So in the first 4 months that I was home, my surgeon did 3 surgeries on my shoulder. And that was just to try and get me to move my shoulder.
Yeah.
He was adamant that I will not ride my bike in 2014. But so, yeah, anyway, he did 3 surgeries on me. So I had 5 surgeries that first 4 months. Then I went over to Italy. I finished the race, barely. I couldn't use my arm. Came back and he had to do my 5th surgery on my shoulder. That's the first time he heard that I'd been over to finish the race. He was actually quite angry with me. So yeah, since then I've had 8 surgeries in my shoulder. I've had 2 surgeries in the left shoulder due to a crash in 2018, and I've had a surgery for emergency cancer in my leg, quite a big one, in end of 2016.
Sure. I mean, you must just be a regular in hospital. Grant, you said you went back in 2014 to do the race. When was it that you began to believe again that you would be able to get on a bike?
Sure. I can tell you that I by the time I came back to South Africa, I was so determined. I already then believed I will get back on the bike because when you're a believer like me and you have faith, then what seems impossible can become possible to you, even though for others it's not. So I was convinced I would get back on the bike, no doubts. But my goal was always to start riding on the 1st of February 2014. And at that stage, I could still not bend down and touch my toes. But I started riding 1 Feb. And that's where I took a big dive, because I went out to the cradle and I was able to ride for only 20 minutes. I think it was just short of 20 minutes. And I was in so much pain, I had to get off my bike. And there it hit me. And I thought, like, yes, Kron, I think you've been smoking something. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But then you pick yourself up and you just persist. And the next day I went back and I rode a few minutes longer and it started to build up. And by the end of Feb, I was able to ride about an hour and a half without having to get off the bike. And then I was convinced I would be able to do it. I mean, I did the La Marmotte in France first, which was the 5th of July. And that was 11 months after my accident.
Unbelievable. And did you ever see those doctors again who said you would never ride?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was one of my big goals. When I went over to Italy after I did the Marmotte, then I was confident. So the Marmotte's a 170-kilometer race. You finish on top of Alpe d'Huez. You climb over 5,000 meters. I finished it. It took me over 8 hours, but I finished it. And then from there, I went straight to Italy, trained for 2 weeks, and did the race I crashed in. And I remember I finished the race, and the very next day I went through to ICU. We arranged an appointment through the tourism board, because you can't just walk into ICU there. And they were expecting me, and I arrived there. And I remember walking in and going through, and I saw the doctor who treated me on the road. I saw the ICU nurses, and I saw the other ICU doctor. I saw them all together, and they wanted me to take my shirt off. They wanted to look at my shoulder, and they just couldn't believe that I was back and that I'd done it. But I think the biggest surprise for them was that I actually came back to say thank you.
Yeah.
They said nobody ever does that. No one ever comes back to say thank you. So that was my goal, and I'm still friends with them to this day. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful bit of the story. And Grant, I mean, you've gone more than 360, I would say. So you were racing before. Now you are doing extreme riding. You've started your Impossible Tours, of which you've done 5. Tell us a bit about that and where that idea came from.
Yeah, when I finished in France and Italy in 2014, my brother was there to support me. We finished. And I think it was a bit of divine inspiration, to be quite honest, because we stopped there in Italy, and we had dinner that night, big celebration because I finished, and people from Trento was there with us. And I said to my brother, I said to him, but, if I can ride this thing with half an arm and half a leg, I think I can go a lot further when I'm fully recovered, And I said to him, I want to come back next year. I want to see if I can ride for 24 hours through the Alps and raise some money. Yeah, and I started planning it. So the first one I did was 2015. I went to Laureus. I've always followed Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, even before my accident. I just love the fact that they do stuff with kids around sport and keep them busy after school and give them purpose. That's the beauty of sport. And I went to them. I showed them, what happened to me and all that stuff. And I remember they were like, yeah, sure, go for it. We'll be very grateful. Not very convinced that I'll be able to do what I set out to do. I decided in 2015, I want to do the Northern Alps, 420 kilometers. I'm going to see if I can do it within 24 hours. And you have to ride over 10 alpine mountains, climb over 10,000 meters. So I did it. I rode through the night, and I raised about R250,000 for them. Huge success. And I finished, and I felt great. I was as strong as an ox. I was so strong still. And I said to Glenn, I'm going to come back 2016. I want to double it. I'm going to do 1,000 Ks. And it just started from there. And every year I've been doing it. And a lot of people started following me, not necessarily just to see how far I can ride my bike, but just the fact that I am doing what I'm doing, given what happened to me.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so symbolic, those mountains, of what people go through in life, that you can overcome these things. You see that mountain in front of you, but you can get over it. It's not impossible. It's all up here.
Yeah.
So it just evolved from there. It's been an absolute.
I mean, you continue to do these Impossible Tours. Last year you did one in South Africa, which has possibly been described as the most difficult. Now, that's quite something, bearing in mind the mountains in the Alps and the Pyrenees that you've done already.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. I think what people forget, and I say it with respect, there's a lot of guys here that would ride 1,000 Ks. There's the Munga event, and there's a couple of other long-distance ultra endurance events. So a lot of people can ride that distance. What differentiates what I do is, yes, I have a support car. I don't ride with a whole lot of stuff on my bike and all that, but I ride it like a time trial. And the purpose behind it is fundraising. So there's a whole different element to it. But I generally try and do these rides in the fastest possible time. So I don't spend a lot of time off the bike. I don't sleep. I will nap for 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. It's trying to get to from point A to B in the fastest possible time. The only difference is point B is 1,000 Ks down the road, and there's 20 mountains in between. So when you ride in the Alps, it's mentally, I found it's a lot more challenging than the ride I did in South Africa last year, which was physically much more challenging. Mentally in the Alps, because yes, you do a lot of climbing, it's extremely difficult, but you have a lot of descending, so physically you can recover, but you have to concentrate so incredibly hard, knowing what can go wrong when it does at those speeds. So it's a whole different ballgame. Here in South Africa, the ride I did was about, if I remember correctly, about 800 was off-road, and the balance of the 1,300 Ks was on tarmac. And the terrain was incredibly tough. I climbed over 12,000 meters, including the Swartberg Pass, the Baviaanskloof, all those. So what made that very difficult was I didn't necessarily have those long descents where I can recover physically.
Yeah.
That's two different things, but yeah, it was physically brutal. It was absolutely brutal.
I mean, what you've done is remarkable, Grant. Especially from where you came from with the injuries. Do you still have any uncomfortableness on the bike or any pain, or are you pretty much recovered and back and good to go?
Adam, you know, something I live with, and I try not to think about it. You almost get used to it. Yeah, I have regular shoulder pain, regularly. I just don't talk about it. But I regularly have to, I need to do it more often than I do, but stretching and doing mobility exercises, and that is part of it. Because if I don't, I get so stiff and I really start to struggle on the bike. And even now still, when I go out training, and I do 7-8+ hour rides, my shoulder does start paining. In all these tours I've done, I end up with immense shoulder pain, always.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's something I live with, you know. I still regularly have to go for rehab on my legs, trigger points that I have now as a result of the accident, with my hips, my hip flexors, all those things, my SIJ. So there's a lot of stuff I still struggle with, and I always will. But you just don't ponder on it, you know.
And Grant, do you ride with caution when you're going down extreme downhills or in treacherous conditions? Or do you still ride the way you rode before the accident?
Definitely not. Not at all, no. I used to be a bit of a kamikaze before the race, before the accident. Yeah, sure. But yeah, I'm still very cautious now. Absolutely. I've got no need to race. I need to ride with him myself. So
Yeah.
yes, I have 30 years of experience. I've got cumulatively now probably over all the years, probably more than 10 years of experience in riding down those mountains. So I've got a lot of experience. It enables me to still descend at a pretty good rate. I can still keep up with some really good guys, but I certainly don't take risks. If I feel uncertain, I back off, no problem. Very, very cautious. Yeah, that accident is always in the back of your mind, always.
Sure.
You'll never forget it.
And Grant, I mean, if you had to give a message, this is going to be a twofold question. The first element is if you had to give a message to a youngster who has been in an accident, not initially a bike accident, but an accident where their injuries are as severe as yours, the outlook is as severe as yours was, what would your advice to them be? And then the second element is if you had to give advice to a young cyclist who had possibly had an accident, not to quite the level of yours, but has been in an accident, has been injured quite badly, and is reticent of getting back on the bike, what would your advice to them be? So if we just start with someone who's been in an accident similar to the dangers of yours.
Yeah. Look, I think I can answer both with the same. I can answer both questions with the same answer, and that comes from a lot of feedback I get from people on Messenger and social media when they see my interviews on television or hear me speak at conferences and stuff. My message is always the same: that don't let what happened to you define who you are. You know, it's an experience that you had to go through, and there has to be a reason behind it. And you need to take that experience, you need to do something with it. You know, stuff happens in life. And when something bad happens, it's up to you whether you're going to do something with it. Because if you don't, it's going to do something with you. You're going to become a victim. You're going to live in fear. You're going to, like the example you would like me to relate to is someone who's had a bad crash and they're scared to get back on the bike. The only way to overcome that is to put it behind you. And one of the best ways to do it is to overcome that fear, and you tackle it head on. How did I manage to go and ride down those same mountains that I almost died on within a year when I haven't even fully recovered yet? If I fell there, the consequences would have been astronomical. But it's because I used the power of the mind and I determined that is going to become something that has happened for me, not to me.
Yeah.
So to me, it's an attitude thing. And a lot of the feedback I get is from people who've listened to my story and have decided, yes, they are going to ride their bike again, because they've never managed to overcome what happened. And they're not going to let that fear hold them back anymore. That word always comes up.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is change the way you look at it and see it as something that happened for you, not to you, and use it.
I think Grant, your story really tells a story of two elements of the power of the mind. The fact that the power of the mind can essentially cure the body, obviously with the right medical assistance, but also the power of the mind can get you back to a position where you were and get rid of that fear to a certain extent to be able to accomplish your goals and your dreams.
Yeah, for sure. But it's one thing to have power of the mind, but you've got to have vision. You've got to have something you're working towards. It's got to be clear. And it's got to be something that takes you out of your comfort zone, something that's going to stretch your boundary.
Yeah.
Because it'll give you something to work towards. So that has to be coupled to that. Yeah, very much so.
Well, Grant, thank you for sharing your story with us on Sport SA Daily Diary. It's been brilliant to chat to you.
Thanks for having me.
We look to watching you carry on with these impossible tours around the world.
Yeah, we'll see how this year pans out, whether I go to Europe or not, or whether I do another one in South Africa. Either way, one of them is going to happen before the end of the year, so we'll see. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for
talking.
Cheers. Catch us again tomorrow on Sport SA Daily Diary, where we'll be chatting to superbike racer Savannah Woodward.